Welcome to Feel Seen Space. We are a digital platform designed for artists and creatives who yearn for more. At a time of massive change, what does it mean to create? What role does artistic expression serve for the individual and the collective? On this podcast, we try to answer these questions by interviewing artists on their holistic creative processes, their work, and their personal journey.
Today, I'm honored to introduce one of my closest friends and one of the most generous, caring, visionary leader in fashion education, Marie Geneviève Cyr. With over 25 years of global experience in the fashion industry, she's former director of the BFA Fashion Design at Parsons. And she's now the founder of MGC Consulting, a platform that's redefining fashion through mindful innovation, cross-cultural collaboration, and education. Her work is deeply influenced by her practice as a Zen Buddhist, grounding her leadership in presence, compassion, and intentionality. Whether she's guiding a young designer's first collection or reshaping academic program around the globe, she brings a calm, centered vision that bridges digital experimentation, sustainability, and inclusivity. Today on the podcast, we'll explore our approach to fashion education and mindful design rooted in deep care and how she creates safe spaces for others to grow and create freely. Let's begin. Hi, MG. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We are so excited to have you, and we know you're a bit jet lagged. You've been traveling a lot lately. So where are you in the world now?
So I've returned from leading master classes in Vietnam and also in China, and now I'm in the Gaspésie, which is very far away, the eastern part of Canada, Quebec, if you wish as well. So I'm here to ground myself a little bit. After a lot of international travels, it's really nice to actually be back in my hometown. There's so much that has been happening in my life as well. So after almost 2 decades in academia, I've decided to launch my own thing. So I've launched Marie Geneviève Cyr Consulting, which is kind of a global consulting agency led by myself that really focus on radical creativity and also mindfulness. So, a lot of mentoring and masterclass and teaching. So I'm very excited to start that. So that's where I am emotionally, mentally, and physically.
Amazing. So I guess because it's such a new venture for you, you had the time in Asia to plan and put everything in motion, right?
Yeah. I was working on finalizing the website with my research assistant at the time. That's I was doing that. But at the same time, I was so busy focusing on, the engagement I had with students. So it was a little bit difficult to manage everything at the time. So now that I'm back and I'm a little bit more grounded, I have more time to reconnect with that. And I will be launching it later this week. So, yeah.
Amazing. Asia, Vietnam, Beijing is very different than Gaspésie. This is where you grew up, and I'm curious to hear more about what was your creative outlet when you were a kid, and how was it growing up in Gaspésie, really?
Growing up in Gaspésie at the time felt really kind of far away, but I think when you're a kid you don't realize how amazing this kind of environment is, because right now I see my niece growing up here and other kids, and it's so unbelievable to go to the beach every day and go in the forest and do all these things that, living in a city like New York or Beijing, the lifestyle is so different, But I didn't really grow up in a kind of creative family, let's say, but, I was raised in a small town called Calaton-sur-Mer. But the good thing is I was really connected to nature. So I've grown to learn and understand how my deep connection with nature has been a very, very important part of my life. I was surrounded by the sea, the mountains, and the forest at all times. There was a way at least to connect with myself in a different way. Not just as a creative, but as a really young person growing up. When I was young, I really, really loved to study. I studied a lot of different things. I would do piano. I was a figure skater until I was 17 years old. I also did theater as well. But at the same time, when I was young, I was really, really shy. And I really loved to study, like I said. But it was a thing inside of me since I was young that I knew I was not meant to be here. I knew I was not supposed to be here. And it's kind of such a weird feeling when you're a kid that you feel like, I have friends, but I don't feel like I connect to things here so much. Like I'm not supposed to be here, you know? So at 17 years old, I left and I moved to Montreal. And I think for me, discovering fashion was really interesting because the closest mall was 6 hours away from me. So I think at 15 years old, that was a moment for me that I discovered that fashion or dressing yourself in a different way, I could actually communicate with other people, other parts of myself that they didn't really see. And it really made me stronger at the time. I was less shy. I was believing in myself. I started, dating and doing more activities and being more social, which was like almost like a transformative. Of course, like as a teenager, you go through that transformation. But I think for me, it was a big deal to realize that fashion could do that as well.
So would you say fashion gave you the confidence to be your true self or your identity playing in that world?
I think at that moment, yes, I realized that it could show different parts of me. I don't really think about one identity because I think my identity changes every single day. But I grabbed my curiosity because I didn't know anything about fashion. It was something so foreign for me living here in my hometown. So it was something, yes, that made me feel much more comfortable with myself, So I think that was a really powerful tool at the time. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can also relate because I am from a small town outside of Montreal, and I don't know about you, but I wanted to see more. I wanted to experience more. I wanted to discover new culture. Is there a moment in your life that you were just like, I need to pursue higher education. I need to go after something bigger?
Well, I think at 17, I moved to Montreal and studied fashion there because, of course, that was the closest city. I only spoke French at the time, so I went to a French school there. When I graduated, I knew I wanted more. I discovered I really loved to study. And for me, that was not enough, And I think it's related to the industry in Montreal. It's not like a big fashion industry. So for me, I was like, oh, I need to go somewhere else. I need to study more. I need to experience something else because the education I received in Montreal was really good, but it was more technical. And I was missing this really pure artistic practice. So that's when I received a big scholarship from the Montreal Fashion Foundation to go study in the UK. That really, really opened another part of my life and another part of me and my identity as well at the time.
And would you say that in Montreal you had mentors or you had people that you relate to?
Interesting. Yeah. The thing was, when I was in Montreal, there were a lot of people that kind of inspired me throughout my journey. I remember this girl, Alex, she was really, really eccentric and she had a shaved head and she was working in art galleries in the old Montreal and she was really artistic and she was a free-spirited woman and I really, really liked that. I also befriend with people who were really passionate in the cinema industry, screenwriter and directors. I became obsessed with Ingmar Bergman at the time as well, so that had a big influence on me. And I would also say that there was this fashion designer in Montreal, Yves Jean Lacasse. I really loved that he was doing a lot of one-of-a-kind and custom, and people didn't know, but there were all these like really big kind of artists coming to the store and the studio all the time. Celine Dion and her brothers came in one day, and politicians were coming, like queens from it was like really crazy, but like people didn't really know that in Montreal, and we did a lot of like custom and it was kind of felt private and it was kind of a creative freedom there that I've never really found too much in the industry. So there was kind of a creative freedom that I really liked there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you felt the need to move outside of Montreal to see what is possible. Let's say the UK and then New York really opened doors for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was craving new experiences, but I think it's all starting from the challenge. I wanted to continue challenge myself. I think I was not comfortable with the quiet Montreal scene. I was not okay with that. I was just like, no, wait, there's more. So it was very challenging, to go study in the UK at university. And having to learn English real fast and having to write essays. And it was very exhausting as well, in a lot of lecture classes, all in English in Scotland as well. So the accent was really intense, but that was a challenge. And I think that's why I loved it. The same as New York. I came back, I was working in the film industry after my studies in the UK. And then I was like, wait, but I want to know more about the psychology and theories behind fashion and clothing and all of it. I always have this curiosity. It's probably the Gemini in me as well, you know,
Probably.
but I've always been like very curious and I need to learn more. Even now, right now in my life, in this kind of transformative journey, I'm craving something new. I think that's why education is such a big part of my life, and I think it will always be.
Before we dive into your transformation, you were the director of the BFA Fashion Design program at Parsons for many, many years. What was your feeling when you started? Because it's such a big role. And now you're transitioning into doing your own stuff and find your freedom.
Yeah. Oh my God, when it started. I got hired in 2010. At the time, I was working at Zach Posen, and Parsons approached me to go teach fashion history and thesis. So the last kind of capstone of the BFA program. So I decided to take a leap. I've never planned on being a teacher. I was more like in the design scene, and then I was like, oh, why not? That's kind of interesting, you know, and that's a big university. So I did go and didn't leave for 15 years. So I had many different roles within the institution. It took many years before I became the director, but I had many different roles. At the beginning, I was a part-time faculty, and then I became full-time faculty in 2013. And then after that, I was leading external partnerships and sponsorships and events for Parsons, the School of Fashion. I was part of the curriculum committee. I became the associate director at some point. And then during COVID, that's when they named me the director of the BFA Fashion Design program. And it was a big moment as well, because it was this big transitional moment, navigating students being all around the world, you know, remote teaching and learning, and to build community. It was a lot to navigate as well. So I became director at the time.
So a very challenging time for you to adjust, adapt, managing international students that couldn't travel at the time. Also probably the mental health issues that came with it.
Well, it's because in that role, when you're in a leadership and managing a lot of different groups, so it's students, it's faculty, it's admin, it's your team. There are a lot of different groups to navigate. And my thing is I need to support all parts, right? Not just one. So I think it became really challenging. It's like sometimes you're like, okay, like student is the center. But how is the faculty support? How is the admin support in this kind of decision as well? So I think there's a lot of like systematic challenges that came into place. I found myself having to fight for things, fight for budget, fight for students, fight for faculty to equal pay. You know what I mean? I use the word fighting, but my specialty is problem solving things. Sometimes something happened and I'm just running to another building and solving this as soon as possible. So it became really exhausting to constantly have to give my energy to a lot of people daily, hourly. So I think that's what created exhaustion. It's just complete exhaustion, mentally, physically, emotionally. Yeah.
For you was a lot of pressure, a lot of people to manage, expectation, also the politics of the industry that maybe drained you a little bit.
Yeah, I think the politics, but also I was at the institution for 15 years, so I've seen a lot of different changes. There were a lot of amazing things as well, but there's some changes that impacted negatively our community. When I say community, it's everybody, faculty, students, maintenance, all teams that I'm connected to as well. And it became a lot of injustice, and we saw a lot of protests throughout the years from faculty, students, because of politics internally, but because with everything that happens outside in the world. So there's a lot of things to navigate as well. And I think these kind of dynamics within the institution started to change a lot. And I had to start existing within these toxic situations or relationships or teams or engagement. And it was very, very difficult as well. And I think this prolonged period of many years being in this constant sense of urgency and problem solving and attitudes, it was very difficult. And I think it deeply affected my health health and my spirit, basically. So it was really heartbreaking, but there was a moment of clarity. I realized that I was also participating in that system. You know what I mean? So it's not like that toxicity of the entire university, it's all others and not me, because I'm part of that system in a way. And I also decided to let these experiences affect me, affect my well-being. I continued to pour my energy into that system and forgetting to take care of my own health and my own self, So I think that experience led to me going to the emergency at some point, But I've learned a lot. I learned a lot about boundaries as well. I've had to learn to really implement boundaries around me, not just in my professional life, but personal life as well. And that was really, really new, And obviously recently I stepped away and I chose myself. And I think I'm slowly reclaiming myself, but it's a long grieving process, I'm like thinking about new systems of care for myself and a new sense of self, but it's a big journey. But now I'm at peace with it, and I'm actually really excited about this transformation that I'm going through,
Yeah, that's great. I saw you with your student during critique. You're so generous. You deeply care for your student and for the work you do, and your passion is shining in every single project you do. So I have the feeling that it was nonstop, that you couldn't have time to reflect. I think you went to the extreme to realize, unfortunately, that it wasn't good for you anymore.
I think the idea of deep care for others can be having positive or negative impact, especially when you have a really deep care that is undervalued or not fully recognized by an institution. It's just like exhausting. I'm thinking the moments that I really started to think like, whoa, slow down for a second. I think it's every time I had something that was happening physically to me. It's almost if I decided to ignore anything that was emotional or mental. But when that became really, really physical, that's when I started to notice. And that started years ago. I had like heart palpitation, panic attacks, and it led to me at the emergency last year as well, with many organs that were inflamed, and it was really, really bad. So for me, the wall that was at that moment, I couldn't move, barely sleep for a couple of weeks. So that was a wall. And then a week after I went to the emergency, my dad had an accident as well, and he ended up at the emergency with multiple fracture in his back. So that was really bad. And then my mom went to the emergency, and then my sister as well. So there are all these things, and you cannot ignore that. You're like, the universe is telling me something right now.
Yeah.
Very loud right now,
Yeah.
The universe is screaming at me right now, basically, right? So it was a moment where I had to leave New York and come here in my hometown for a couple months, take care of my mom and my dad, and starting my own kind of healing journey as well. So it was a huge shift in perspective. And I started to really see life in a different way. What do I really want? What do I really care about? That was the beginning of the transformation. But it's sad that it took me that wall to realize that I was not taking care of myself, you know?
And from that moment, are you able to find the tools to regulate your nervous system? Did you find practices that really helped you just to go through that critical moment?
Yeah, at the beginning, to take care of myself, I think that was also just rest, And for the first time in my life, I did a weekend retreat, intro to Zen meditation practice, upstate New York in a Buddhist monastery. And that completely changed a lot of things in my life, That was another big moment of transformation for me. I've never meditated. Like, I didn't do yoga. I was just nonstop running. Even when I did go to the gym, I was on the treadmill. It's like I couldn't think about myself doing other kinds of activities. And so it was really interesting for me to be like introduced to Zen practice and meditation, and I was like, my God, there's something here, So that was a really big moment for me at that time. But another thing that happened is when I started to make my way back from my hometown, the moment I decided after 2 months taking care of my family, now I need to go back to New York. And then that started something completely out of the blue for me. I would be driving and then all of a sudden I would start crying, like pouring crying, like alone in a car. I'm just going grocery shopping, you know? That happened to me quite a few times. I drove to Montreal, same thing happened out of nowhere, crying. So it was almost like if my body was telling me something, prepare yourself to go back to New York, but that's not the New York you want to be in anymore, you know? So I guess, yeah, meditation and Buddhist practice really helped me and continue to help me.
That's really interesting because, as you said, you were grieving the fact that you were done with Parsons or with the role you had there, but you were also done with the city that you lived in for many years. So it's really a shift of paradigm to say, I need to be okay with taking the leap of faith because I don't know if I want to continue living in New York, if I want to continue to teach. But I feel you're now super open.
Yeah, but it took me a while because I went through dark times. I didn't feel like this for the entire time grieving. It is hard because being 15 years at a job and having one career, I studied fashion and then performance art and like theories that was always related to fashion in a way. And then at this moment, I was just like, wait a second. But I've been feeling that I'm ready for a new chapter for a moment. But I think, yes, accepting this identity that I had as an academic leader, you know, and someone living in New York to now being okay to be like, no, I think this part of my life is over, you know? It's hard. It's very hard, you know. I've been in New York for like 18 years and at an institution for 15 and then leaving that. It is scary, but it's crazy how I've been feeling so much happier. There's a sense of liberation that it's finally happening. And this is new. It's only since like a month or something, you know? It's new that I'm feeling that way. I even got here and my parents looked at me and they were like, oh my God, you look so happy. You know what I mean? So there's something that people see as well in me. So I'm clearly changing my energy and my karma at this moment, you know? Yeah.
I mean, you look beautiful and you glow, and we're so proud of you.
Oh, babe. Thank you. I have great friends, so that's another good thing I've had. In this period, it was really, really difficult because often I needed to be like alone. There was a moment that I needed to have this moment of isolation. And sometimes it's hard as a friend to understand, okay, she's not texting or calling. I need to be okay with this. And it's very difficult. And then sometimes being there because I need the social. So it's kind of like navigating these kind of moments. And it was a lot of dark moments that I didn't tell anybody that I was feeling like that, but I told some of my best friends later about this and they were like, but why did you not tell me? I would have been there. But it's hard because when you're grieving, it's something you have to do on your own. But I've had really amazing friends who've been supporting me along the way. And my sister is a big support mechanism as well. My sister had a moment of transformation and she developed a lot of different systems and tools to take care of herself. And I really admire her a lot.
And I think even if it's like a quiet support, you know that your friends and family and your community is there behind you. Also, you had such a beautiful community of students, of peers at Parsons. They are all super sad that you left, but they are also cheering for you. Would you say that you have a strong creative community around you?
Thank you for bringing back my colleagues because I was in the process of resigning and drafting my resignation letter and they were always reaching out like, how are you doing? You want to see you? And I really felt like, wait, I need to do this. I don't want to tell them there was always these things. I'm so close to the community as well at Parsons, the professors, the alumni and students. So I'm so connected. And even I went back and security guards would hug me. It was just like very interesting when I came back very briefly for a critique that even the maintenance guy was like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in a long time. And I think really thinking about this extended community, it was so sad to me to be like, oh my God, I'm leaving. But I realize now that I had a lot of impact on a lot of people that people didn't see, or leadership didn't see that. I'm always being a leader on the ground, not hiding in an office or behind emails, So for me, that's always been important to be connected to the community I work with. So in terms of a belonging to a creative community, I don't know if I like this idea of belonging to something, I like to belong to a lot of different groups in a way. And I think the good thing around me that I really love is there are a lot of different people with different creative experience, but just life experience. And I think this is really important, actually more important than just a traditional creative community right now. I try to surround myself with people that comes naturally from different angles or life experiences. And I really hope I will continue to connect with new people, because I feel since I've started this journey, I've met new people from different backgrounds. And I hope I will continue, because I think it's very, very important as well to not just creatively, but just in general, to have people from different culture and backgrounds. I think that's super important.
Do you ever lose track on your creative projects? Maybe you're a professional artist or creative, but what used to be your passion now feels uninspiring. Or maybe you decided to pursue a safer career path, but you just know you have that artistic side of you that's dying to come out. At Feel Seen Space, our mission is to get you back in touch with your creativity, your flow, and your purpose. If you're ready to feel seen, we offer one-on-one holistic mentoring sessions designed to reconnect you to your inner artist. You'll find all the information at the link in the show notes. We hope to see you soon. So, MG, you were talking about traveling a lot and having a community that's very international. And I'm curious, how, as a teacher, do you feel that cultural differences affect the way that people create?
It does. I think not only cultural differences, socioeconomic differences, life experiences, there are a lot of things that impact creativity. Because especially when you teach fashion design or art, often you get into these very personal conversations with students or with emerging designers. And the one thing I would say is I've learned so much from students as well, because of course I was in an institution for many years that was filled with international students from all around the globe. And that was such a richness that I'm never going to forget. So that's really interesting, because even if you are in New York City, I had these mini daily experiences of a lot of different culture. So that was really, really nice. When I, let's say, go and teach and give master classes around the globe, it's very, very interesting, because when I'm in, let's say, Dominican Republic working with designers, the way they see fashion or art and design is very different than someone who grew up in Cambodia, for example, right? So perhaps the way they engage with, just an example, the way they engage with colors, color dynamics, energy, composition was very different and very open in a very different way. And then perhaps when I go to Vietnam, it's very, very different. They're really thinking much more about craftsmanship and the way they want to integrate that, and perhaps even more nature or sustainability. So that's different. When I go to China, is something very personal, and it's very interesting teaching around the globe. And of course, you go to London, it's different. And I think that's the beauty of it as well. For me, that's important, and that transformation, that the teaching I did at one institution in one city in my life, that now I'm taking this education. And that's what I want to do for the next 10 years in my life. I want to continue travel and have short-term almost contract in different institutions or art and design organizations around the world, because I really want to provide access of education, but I want to make sure it's an exchange as well, right? I go there, I give, but I also learn from them as well. It's this kind of loop that I'm really excited about.
Amazing. And so you mentioned sustainability, and I'm curious, within the 15 years that you officiated at your old job, how has sustainability and the evolution of technology affected the way that one learns about fashion and one actually designs?
Yeah. There's so many things that impact the way we design fashion at the moment as well. I've seen a lot of changes, but I think the main thing that I would start by saying is the complexity of our fashion ecosystem is so complex and so vast and so big that it's often overwhelming for young designers to navigate, because there are all like these new technologies as well and these new kind of mini sectors that started to grow in our ecosystems that are really important to all look at. For example, I always say ecosystem because I don't like to say fashion industry, because for me fashion industry is a very elitist kind of like small way of looking at it. I use ecosystem because I want to make sure fashion designers are really thinking about farming as well. For example, there are a lot of people that are in the ecosystem, not only that buys or create fashion, but a lot of other people that experience, talk about fashion, that you not only wear fashion, if you wish. And in terms of sustainability, yeah, I created a lot of courses for sustainable practices. But when I think about sustainability and the way I teach sustainable practices, I want to make sure that it's not only about materials, it's also about people. When I do the master classes, around the globe, I do these exercises of like cultural mapping, because it's important for me for the emerging designer to understand their own local ecosystems before they even think about the global ecosystems as well, right? So we're looking at local crafts, we're looking at local techniques, we're looking at local patterns, local designs, the biggest products, the biggest industries, locally, resources locally. So we do that collaboratively. So I think that's something really important, it's no matter what, when we think about sustainability, it's like, do you actually understand your local ecosystem? Number one, that's the first thing to understand. So there's a lot of work to do with sustainability, but I also try to teach a lot emerging designers when I do the master classes about sustainable practices in fashion. It's not just the artisanal craft way of looking at fashion. You can actually scale it much bigger, because often that was the blockage in a way. They were like, oh, it's a crafty thing to do, like upcycling. But now I give them a lot of examples, around the globe of designers that actually created their brand, building a system that was implemented from the very beginning. So that's very interesting, because no matter what, it's like young emerging designers, often when you do things with them, it feels really abstract. But when you tell them these big designers, they also do that. And now they're like, oh yeah, okay, me too. I want to create a sustainable system within my own brand, Can be upcycling, can be natural dye. We talk about zero waste, the humans behind, your brand, your team, the people who work for you. So I think it starts with educating people. And I think that I like to always try to implement these ideas or these values as well when I teach. Yeah.
You talked at length about your love for knowledge and for information and theory, but when you actually teach the young generation about something as abstract and peculiar as fashion design, how much of it is theory, and then how much is, as you said, setting examples? How much of it is emotional? How would you say all that adds up?
So I think my biggest strength or my expertise is to really kind of teach about research and design practice, but especially the space between the initial research and this kind of translation. Where do you go from readings, maybe some writings, maybe some images, maybe some oral history? Like, how do you package, how do you extract from all this and create fashion? And that's the spot that I love the most. That's what I really try to focus on when I teach, but it's difficult. So I talk about research, and we do a lot of exercises where students really think about all the different kinds of researches. And when I say kinds, it's not just primary and secondary research, but to really think about text, the idea of text within research. Text can look like a lot of different things, right? It can be reading, it can be writing, it can be creative writing for your own self, it can be poetry, whatever. Note-taking. Text is a big part of research. I also talk about 2D. So this idea of drawing can be a form of research, looking at a photograph or a painting can be part of a research as well, And also think about 3D. So 3D in terms of object. How do we start research using objects as a method of study? So I do a lot of exercises like that. So it's not just draping and materials, but other objects. It can be an installation, anything like that too. And I talk about 4D, which is much more like, let's say, video, thinking about sound, interviews, how do you get from that kind of media, translate that into fashion. I also talk about 5D, and I call it 5D in terms of something that's more experiential, it can be music, it can be a travel experience you've had, or things like that as well. It can be AI, VR, these kind of different experience. And then after that, I teach the students how to create lexicon. Words that we're using in research and design practice are very, very important too. So we do that. And then I extract with them, and then we translate that into the way we drape, the way we do mini sculptures, the way we draw, the way, you approach materials, the way you approach clothing, the way you approach accessories, the way you approach the way you're going to market your company, the way you're going to have your story told all the way until the editorials as well, So anyway, so that's I could talk a lot about this, but I'm just showing you the way. I think, what are you actually looking at? It started like that for me.
So exciting. I wish I had you as a teacher. But so it seems like your students are introduced to so many other creative outlets than just fashion design. But ultimately, as you said, it comes back to this form that is a garment. So what do you think is different between creating a garment and creating any kind of art form or other design?
A garment, it's just a form that we use as creatives to communicate something. Because if you think about sculpture can be a mini commercial ceramic in a souvenir store, but it can also be an object that communicates something much deeper in a gallery setting or somewhere else. So I think it's just a form that we use, same as sound. Sound can be used for anything, right? For meditation, for music, anything. So I see clothing as a medium of communication. And I think part of my creative practice is something that I've been exploring a lot, how clothing can be much more than just a practical form. Yeah.
And so outside of fashion, what other art forms are inspiring you the most?
I think it's always about experience as well, or environment. I'm really someone very sensitive about my own environment. In general, like the way I look at art, like installation or sculptures are really the forms that impacts me the most emotionally. That's been my experience. And even days ago when I was in Beijing, I went to see an exhibit. It was like a lot of installation, and I was like, oh my God, I felt so much. I was like, I haven't felt like that for a long time, but I don't think I feel the same with like other art form. That's the one. Yeah.
And do you have any artists in particular that you're very fond of in that sphere?
I mean, there are a lot of artists that I really love. So maybe not right now because this constantly changes. For example, this morning I was reading poems by Margaret Atwood, our Canadian, of course, writer. When I moved to Montreal, at some point when I studied fashion, I was really, really deeply inspired by the work of Hussein Chalayan. I think for me, he was the one. And I think that's because it was all related to environment. Is it fashion? Is it furniture? Is it a performance? Is it a play? And I think, politics and body politics and all these things. And for me, that was so, so important. And I think from that time, I realized the way I see fashion, it's not practical, basic clothes. It's not that. It's something much greater than that. And it had a big, big, big impact on me. And then when I started to be interested more in doing like costume design or performance, I became completely obsessed with Ingmar Bergman, reading so many books. I was really obsessed with this psychology mixed with cinema and like the way he was writing, the way he was directing the scene, and visually the use of colors. And I started to read more about like the psychology of colors. And there was a moment in my life I was really, really obsessed. I actually met Liv Ullmann years later, one of obviously his best actress. And I cried so hard. I remember that was at BOM in Brooklyn. I went to a talk she was giving, and it was right after he passed away, and it was just so emotional. That was that. And then more recently, over the past maybe 10 years or 15 years, I really like Xu Bing. Xu Bing is a Chinese artist that really looks at universal like language and spirituality and his installations, and I'm really, really kind of looking at this. And I also met him recently. random, it looks like I do actually meet some people I really like as well. He was at the China Institute in New York maybe like a month and a half ago, and I saw that and I went and I met with him, and it was like so amazing. He was giving a talk on his new art work that he's developing at his studio in China, so it was really nice.
So cool. And so you seem to have an incredibly strong bond with China and Asia in general through your traveling, through your work, the fact that you taught so many students from Asian countries. But a few months ago, you pushed that further and you now have a spiritual practice that is also rooted in Asian tradition. So can you tell us a bit more about how that happened and how it affects your daily life?
Oh my God, yeah, this is something, again, really unplanned. But yeah, I started the Zen meditation and I started to practice more and more. I did a residency upstate at the monastery, and there's a temple in Brooklyn as well. So I go every single week at the temple. I go meditate. I go, talk to the Sangha there as well. I've never done anything like that. And it's what I love about Buddhism. Well, the one I'm connected to is this Japanese Soto Buddhism. So it's like one specific type of lineage as well. But it's very interesting because I never thought I would do that. And then at some point I realized there's something in my past lives, that is connected to Asia, because I've learned Mandarin. I go to Asia so much as well. And all of a sudden I start Buddhism. There's something there that I feel like really familiar with or connected to. And again, I'm coming back from Asia right now. And of course I go to temple there, and my relationship to Buddhism or Buddhist temples, when I go there, is different. I actually understand a little bit more what's going on. So it's very interesting. But since then, it helped a lot with my anxiety. It helped a lot with connecting with my own self. I also did 2 sessions, which is in Buddhism, a session is a week-long silent meditation retreat. And it's very specific. It's like, of course, it's in silence. We meditate maybe like 10 hours a day. It's like you don't talk to anybody. You don't look at anybody. You don't want to break their silence. And no reading, no writing, no creative practice. So it's like a way to completely immerse yourself into just being with your own thoughts. And that is so challenging mentally, emotionally, and physically to do anything like that. And this really, really impacted me a lot. First time I did that was before I fully decided to resign. And I remember I did that for a week. I was on fire. Like I had like resentment. I had all these emotions. Anger. I had so much emotion and really, really dark things happening as well. So it was very difficult. But then at the end of the week, you feel some kind of liberation, to feel like I released that. It's a really, really great experience. And I did one as well more recently, another one, but I was in a very different mindset, right? 2 months ago. So it's after my resignation, I went to do a 1-week session upstate New York at the monastery. That was the last week of work at the institution. So for me, it was really symbolic, the idea of releasing a part of my life and embracing a new chapter as well. It's still part of my life, I still meditate in the morning. I listen to Buddhist podcasts, and the Sangha I'm connected to. There are a lot of things happening online that I can connect with as well. So yeah, I think it's a new thing. I'm not saying that I'm going to do that all my life, but I'm just saying that at this moment in my life, that is a great kind of alignment as well. Yeah.
You're open. It's funny because it seems to be a whole theme within your transition. We all are being extremely fixed on your identity and who you are and where you live and what your job is, and having all these labels on you, to suddenly being so open and so free, and there's a flow. Like you seem so much more fluid, and it's cool. I feel like we all want to feel like that.
I think one of the biggest thing that I've learned from practicing Buddhism, or even just like Zen meditation practice, is that it's so difficult to change because we're so conditioned by society. There's so many layers. When I meditate, I try to be Zen, but it's almost like all these layers of conditioning all your life that existed in the society or historically or with your family or professionally. You're trying to move away from that, and you have to kind of accept them and push them, and accept them and push them to actually make space for you to explore something new, right? So I think that's been helping me to meditate a lot within this process. Absolutely. It is scary. I should be really scared right now. I just resign. I did a contract, but I'm here in Gaspésie. I don't know how long I will be here. I don't know if I'm going to make a lot of money right now or not, but I feel so good. So it's a weird thing, you know what I mean? So clearly there's something that is aligned right now, because I feel good. And you just realize as well that, a career or a title, does it really make you happy? I don't know anymore. I'm really not convinced anymore, So that's another thing then. And sometimes, I'm just like, yes, I'm going to be leaving New York. I'm leaving my job. Do I leave fashion? I don't know. Do I go study something else? Do I actually continue on this path? I'm not sure. But of course, these questions are all good. I think the biggest challenge is to be okay with change and changing. And that's the hardest thing. Because Sara, you mentioned, we're so protective of our identity or career. It's so part of our identity or so-called identity. But then you realize that it's just conditioning from society. You don't need that. If I want to move to I don't know, Spain in the countryside tomorrow, why not? If I want to, I don't know, I want to go to Portland, Oregon and, work on a farm. Why not? Not that I want to do that. But I'm just saying this idea of the why not, I think became very important to me. So I think I'm less scared with what's happening next because it's why not? Now I'm trying to not feel the pressure from society because when you leave a job that you've been attached for so long, it's part of your identity. The challenge as well is people around you, colleagues, friends that are part of that life, that I had. They were like, so what are you going to do? Oh, you should go work for Nana. You should have a bigger job, a bigger title. Oh, you can become Nana. Oh, you should do this. You should do this. And all these different voices around you, it's now part of your old life. So it's very difficult to think about, okay, now this new chapter, who am I bringing with me, on this journey? Who's okay with me changing as well as another part of me in a way? And who are the new people that I need to be open with to this new chapter? Because I cannot start a new chapter with the same group that surrounded me in that other chapter. And that's the biggest, hardest thing, to be okay with maybe spending less time with someone or being okay that you don't agree with some of your friends anymore. And it's hard, it's super, super hard, because your perspective is changing on everything. So that has been difficult as well.
I think it's ironic how a lot of people who work in the quote-unquote creative industries like fashion only apply the creativity to, say, their function, but not to all of the other aspects of their life. Because when I look at you right now, you seem to have a way of living that is incredibly free and creative. You're open to everything, and that's what creativity is, right? But so, having had that incredible career in New York, and now being so much more open and spiritual, and having deconstructed a lot of things, would you say right now that you know what your purpose is?
Yeah, I think when I'm asked, what is my purpose? The purpose obviously keep changing a little bit, but one thing I really love doing is pull creativity out of people in a way to awaken others' creativity, giving them access to design education, to create space for people to really be who they are as well and to connect with their own creativity. And I think sometimes I'm thinking about my purpose. I still connect with education in a way. And I know I've had a lot of conversations as well about, do I move away from academia? Do I move away from education? I think I'm moving towards other forms of education and mentorship. But I think it's definitely my path and my purpose in this lifetime to really empower young creative to really push their own creativity, to discover part of themselves, to mentor others as well. I don't know if I'm healing something from a past life or anything, but I know it's something that is really, really important to me. So I think it will continue.
And it's so interesting because from what you said earlier to Roxanne, it seems like discovering fashion and that way of expressing yourself was a very healing thing for you. And in a way, it was like a first awakening. And so now that you have have this second awakening to something much bigger than clothes. Maybe you want to transmit that, but obviously you can't teach that in the same way.
But I think one thing I've started to do, I gave a lecture and workshop recently in Hangzhou at the China Academy of Art. And that was the first time I was really transitioning in terms of teaching mindfulness and creativity for fashion designers. So how do you empower and open your own mindfulness or Zen, if you wish, within your own system of working as fashion designers? I think this is something I am definitely continuing and I'm doing more research on, and I know that's where I'm going. Not only the usual fashion design, be as creative and artistic as possible, but now it's like, okay, mindfulness. And I started to bring more breathing exercises as well in my master classes with students. And I've done a lot of in Vietnam and in China recently. I did drawing exercises, just really connecting students with their breath as well. I think it's very important to ground the students. We come to the room, sometimes we feel rushed or we feel our mindset is somewhere else. And just this idea of connecting with others, I think that's going to be so important in the future of creativity or creation as well in general, the idea of connecting with people. So for me now, it's important to just breathe and ground ourselves, and then we can feel more connected with people, but also with our own self. So I'm starting to integrate that more.
So amazing. We need to have a Feel Seen workshop with you and all like breathe and draw together.
Yes.
We can't wait to have you.
Absolutely. We should definitely do that. That would be great.
Thank you so much, MG. It was such a blessing to have you, and we're so happy to be able to share your journey.
That's it for today's episode. We thank our guests for their trust, and we thank you for being a part of our community. If you like this episode and want to support our work, consider ranking our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, please share our work with them to help them spread the dream of a conscious, creative community. Talk soon.